we decided to have a retreat at California Adventure, where we invited all of the creative executives of ABC, and part of the responsibilities of coming to this was that everybody had to pitch 3 ideas for a show. I pitch it, silence, not a word.
Lloyd stood up and said, I want to do Castaway, the series. And all of us, I think, assumed Lloyd meant I want to do a series about a guy in a volleyball.
Tom Sherman, who ran drama for me, comes over and goes, Lloyd, I kind of like that idea you pitched. I said, Tom, here's the good news. You run drama, I run the whole thing, we'll do it.
I had developed Lost with another writer at ABC, and we weren't real pleased with the script so much.
2 weeks pass, I get the rewrite in. I look at the rewrite, it's worse. It's an unmitigated disaster.
And anytime we had an idea at ABC that we were having troubles with, the first name that always popped in their head was, what would JJ do with it?
Lloyd called me and said we should go to JJ, and because JJ was at the studio at that time. And I thought, it was a long shot because he had a lot of other stuff on his plate at that point.
I was a few days away from finishing a pilot I was writing. Lloyd said that they had been trying to do a show about people who survived a plane crash. And I was like, Lloyd, what's the story? A plane crashes as a series?
And JJ's initial reaction was, I'm in the middle of Alias, and I've got this pilot that I'm getting ready to turn into you, and I'm not sure that I see what you guys are excited about.
And in the initial pilot script, the time period in the pilot alone went over like 6 weeks or something. So kind of by the end of the pilot, they were already like coconut bowling and, living in hutches and that kind of thing.
I started thinking about what a story would be that would be interesting to me about a plane crash and the survivors of a plane crash. Then I had this one idea, which was, what if the island wasn't just an island? And what if they found a hatch on the island? And it was this weird little thing that for me was a nugget of like, that could be kind of cool.
JJ called us and said, unfortunately, I have some ideas. And he started to talk about the idea of the island being a character unto itself, that just doing a show about a group of people on a deserted island wasn't necessarily something that he was interested in, but if the island was a character and it was some sort of mysterious place, he could be interested in that. And we said, that sounds great. And he said, but I can't take this on myself right now. I got to finish my pilot. I got Alias, I got everything else. You need to find me somebody that can write this with me.
It's Friday night at like 6:30 to have a writer in his office by Monday. It would have to be someone we've worked with, who we trust. It would have to be someone who I think personality-wise, JJ is really going to respond to. And it has to be someone who is close enough with one or all of us that I can call them Friday night at 6:30 and basically say, I'm sending you the script and do you want to meet J.J. Abrams?
Heather Caden and I had developed a show with this writer, Damon Lindelof, that year. The show was not going to go forward, but we really liked the experience with Damon. He's a great writer, and he just seemed to have the right energy for J.J. They're similar type people.
I literally said to Damon, I know you've been dying to meet with J.J. Abrams, and here's the situation. We have a show, and we need someone to write it with him.
And I was like, great, absolutely, 100%.
Damon also read this other script and had the exact same first reaction. You need to have something, not knowing what JJ's opinion was, you need to have something external coming into the show.
Over the course of that weekend, I started thinking, how do you do a show where, plane crashes on an island? And I started coming up with some ideas about, they would be all about mystery, the mystery of who the people were that were in the crash and the mystery of what the island was that they crashed on.
We have this meeting Monday, and Damon comes to my office, and I bring him over.
I was really nervous, and I came into a room, and JJ was there, a couple of the other Alias writers were there.
He's wearing a Star Wars t-shirt with like a button-down shirt open over it. And we're walking up, and waiting outside of JJ's office is Jesse Alexander and Jeff Pinkner. And right away, Jesse sees Damon's Star Wars t-shirt, and he's like, hey, man, cool t-shirt.
He was wearing a Star Wars Bantha Tracks t-shirt.
And we're like, hey, how are we not best friends already?
He had this, Star Wars t-shirt on, this like kind of vintage Star Wars t-shirt on, and he had glasses like I wear usually.
JJ started pitching out some ideas that he had, and everything that he was saying was sort of all the stuff that I'd been thinking about over the weekend. So I was thinking to myself, oh my God, as soon as I open my mouth, he's going to think I'm the hugest Sick fan ever. Like, oh yeah, I thought that too. Like, oh, that's a great idea. I was actually thinking the same thing.
He was immediately like someone who, I couldn't stand that I didn't know. that I hadn't worked with before. I just loved him immediately.
Apparently, it was just, magic immediately. They immediately got each other. They had the similar ideas about the show.
And I was like, well, strangely enough, I also think that the show should be sort of, rooted in mystery, and that this island that they're on should be weird and scary. And I sort of pitched him this idea that I had for what the beginning of the show could be.
Damon, he said, I'm thinking of starting the show with this guy named Jack. We'd wake up and we'd be on a deserted beach. He'd have an Armani suit on, and he'd be totally discombobulated and not really understand where he is. And he kind of looks like he's in shambles, and he reaches into his pocket and he pulls out a vodka bottle, one of those little ones.
JJ directed it and shot it almost exactly the way that I pictured it in my head, except when I originally pitched it to him, I had Jack waking up on the beach, waking up seeing the dog, pulling out the bottle, but the plane would have crashed in the middle of the jungle. And JJ intelligently reversed that so that Jack would wake up in the jungle and come to the beach, because he realized that if the show got picked up, the wreckage of the fuselage was going to be sort of a main set on the show, and that it would be more dynamic if we saw it on the beach.
And it became really clear really quickly that we were going to accept this challenge.
After the meeting, I went home. I was totally jazzed. I started writing some ideas down. I started sending JJ emails. And then the next day, he was like, why don't you come by again, and we'll start figuring out if we can make this into a pilot.
So we started talking about what the show was, and who these people were, and where they had landed, and what that thing was on the island, and the big picture where we were going. And at the end of an initial conversation of like 20 or 30 minutes, we had discussed where the show goes for, I believe, for the first 5 or 6 years. Like, we understood the big picture. And it was then that we realized we know what the show is.
ABC, meanwhile, was saying, you need to be rolling film in like 4 or 5 weeks. And we're like, well, we just met. Like, they said, by the end of the week, see if you can come up with an outline for a new pilot. So over the course of the next 2 or 3 days, I worked with Jesse Alexander and Jeff Pinkner.
Certainly we always knew a lot of drama would come from the interaction of the characters, but we really felt there needed to be that outside pressure that raised the stakes for everything, and the opportunity to tell a compelling mystery in a way that we had touched on in Alias, with building a mythology and a serialized mystery, and we wanted to add those elements to Lost.
The exploration of this place was a mystery and adventure to itself, and that the island could, in a way, be a dramatic version of a video game. You could find the hatch, but it could take you several weeks before you had the proper tools to open the hatch.
I wrote a 23-page outline on Thursday. JJ and I got together, worked on it a little more, and then on Friday we gave it to ABC.
I get this thing, and my hands are practically trembling as I read it. It was a tour de force for me, because it was absolutely brilliant. And the fact that these guys had written this in 5 days was the most mind-blowing thing I had ever seen.
At ABC, we picked up the show off the outline.
It's hard enough to get a script picked up. To have an outline picked up was unheard of.
On Saturday morning, I remember I was in bed, and around 8:30 a.m. my phone rang, and JJ had been sort of prank calling me all week, and I said hello. It was like, Damon Lloyd Braun. And I was like, Lloyd is the head of ABC. I said, yeah, hi Lloyd, thinking that I was totally getting, and there's a long pause on the other end of the line. He's like, okay, well, anyway, we love the outline, we were going to make the show, and I was like, wow, it's just an outline. There's no script, nothing. And basically, that was the very beginning of what eventually became Lost.